Hello and welcome to Ask a Mechanic. We're continuing our videos on modifications, and today we're talking about suspension. Now, yes, people do raise their suspension, generally people with 4x4s for going off-roading. However, for the purposes of this video, we're talking about lowering your suspension. Now, there are two different types of people who want to lower their suspension. There are people who want to lower their suspension for handling characteristics, to make the car handle more predictably, or to make it stick better to the road. And there are people who couldn't really care less how it handles and just want it slammed, mate. So let's talk about the pros and cons of both. As with everything on every vehicle, when it comes out the factory, suspension is no different. It is a compromise. It is a compromise between handling and comfort and rules and regulations. So that's why people understandably want to change it. So changing your suspension for performance, don't go too low. Yes, you will see lots of vehicles on racetracks like British touring cars which are absolutely slammed to the ground, and there's a reason for that. They only ever drive on a very well prepared, very well maintained, completely smooth tarmac surface. So yes, if that's all you're going to use your vehicle for, take it as low as you like. However, there is more to it than just sending it down on some lowering springs. You have to set up the entire geometry of the vehicle, so that includes camber, caster, and checking that the roll center isn't off, because if it is, it will end in very unpredictable handling. So don't go too low. My recommendation for most vehicles which people tend to modify for handling, you want about a minimum of a centimetre between the top of the tyre and the bottom of the wheel arch. Any more than that and you will come into issues, especially on bumpy roads. You need to make sure that the wishbones are ideally at a flat angle and not inverted. If the wishbones are inverted, then your suspension travel is reduced greatly. The other thing people tend to do is they tend to change the anti-roll bars. Now, anti-roll bars being thicker, if you are after better handling suspension, is no bad thing, but do bear in mind that it will start to feel a lot stiffer with thicker anti-roll bars. So if you do a lot of miles on a lot of bumpy roads, that's also something to contend with. Let's talk about people who just slam their vehicle to make it look different. Now, I'm not going to say to make it look good, because it very much depends on what the vehicle is. I don't particularly like cars that are literally riding on the ground myself, but each to their own. So benefits of that, yes, it can look quite good. You have issues with clearance issues. You can end up rubbing wheels on wheel arches, and when you're going down a bumpy road, for instance a country road, and you come to turn, you will often find that because there is very little travel left in the suspension, you won't grip particularly well before you start skipping across the road. This is unfortunately a price that you pay to make the vehicle look the way you want it to look. So you have to weigh up the options as to how you want it to look versus how you want it to perform. Rake. There are some vehicles which actually handle better being lower at one end than the other. Any vehicle with torsion bar rear suspension is a good example. A lot of smaller Citroens and Peugeots have torsion bar rear suspension, and they actually handle better being slightly lower at the front, about 10 or 15 millimeters lower in fact, than they are at the back. This is mainly because of the way the suspension actually works. It makes for a more predictable turn-in, and it means that you can control the back end better. It also means that you're less likely to suffer from something called lift-off oversteer, which unfortunately has been the death of many thousands of Saxos over the years. Another thing to look at for handling characteristics and for looking different is camber. Camber is where the top of the wheel leans in at a steeper angle than the bottom. Now, people do this for several reasons. Firstly is so that when you are cornering hard, you get more of a contact patch from the tyre on the tarmac. This is a handling benefit. However, people also tend to do it for cosmetic reasons, but they seem to go a little bit over the top. So just be careful and make sure you don't go too far with it. Caster is whereabouts the suspension pivots on the bottom in relation to the top of the suspension strut. Now, if you have more positive caster, it will turn in quicker, but the steering will be heavier. If you have more negative caster, it tends to be for vehicles which don't come with power steering, but they still want the suspension to be relatively light. My advice would always be, when you have done anything at all to your suspension, get the geometry set up. Take it to somebody who not only has the right equipment to deal with a suspension setup, but also has the knowledge to set it up correctly for what you want to do with it. So get your tracking done, get the camber checked, get the caster checked, and more importantly than anything, make sure that the back lines up with the front. Bye for now.